Good morning, everyone. My name is Bruce Dutcher. I'm the president of the Alarian Swanson Neighborhood Association, and we put together a presentation here. Actually, I've had almost no role in it, but we have some great helpers to talk again about Globeville, Alarian, Swansea. Sorry, Bob. You've heard this litany before of all the scale and the quantity of the projects going on in these neighborhoods that were ignored for decades. You have the I-70 expansion for 5 years of construction. I don't know how many millions of cubic yards of dirt will be hauled through the neighborhoods. Then you have the related projects to the stormwater project, most specifically the Globeville Landing Outfall project, just about a quarter of a mile from here. Everybody in these neighborhoods has probably been to, or many people that can take going to meetings, has been to many meetings. We have a citizens advisory group for the Globeville Landing Outfall project, which is basically work in a toxic site with the EPA, Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and Denver Department of Environmental Health. We have the redevelopment of the National Western Center, which is $800 million of taxpayer-funded money, about 200 acres. That is going on, also in a toxic site. It's part of the super fund in the most polluted zip code in the country, 80216. We have the reconstruction of Brighton Boulevard. All that dust that you see flying around, that's part of that city project funded by taxpayer dollars. We have the expansion and permitting of the Suncor refinery about 1 mile from Elyria and Swansea. We are working with that to try to have some influence on that polluter. We have the wave of private development that is coming toward Elyria, Swansea, and Globeville. And our eastern border, we have the Park Hill Golf Course, which the city is ready to pretty much just void a conservation easement on that golf course and turn it over to private development. There's a public process, but I think that public process, we're trying to be part of that and have some influence on that. In the Elyria neighborhood, we've just learned that the Colorado Miners is about to be transitioned. Their contract is up. They took out 3 rec centers in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea in the past 5 years. Transitioning the Johnson Center, the term for Colorado Miners is up. We don't know the fate of our park and rec center in Elyria. But all of these effects are borne by the most vulnerable people in our neighborhoods, and those are the children. So the discussion today is going to be about the effects of this on kids. And so today we have Ean Tafoya is co-chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee. We have Armando Payan, a resident of Globeville, is going to speak. And I'm sorry, Sandra. Hopefully you're going to come up and talk to us about this situation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
And I'd like
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. I want to start by apologizing. We had technical difficulties all the way around. We don't have microphones. We had a presentation. We need to upgrade our screen. I think it's really interesting to have this conversation. I agree it's not just about Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. It is about North Denver. It's about anybody who lives within 500 feet of a highway. I think as we began to do this research, we started to understand that this has implications throughout the city. It just so happens that there's cumulative impacts that are occurring due to the speed of the growth in this community. And so this presentation, which I'll make sure gets emailed to you, was set to be multimedia and do some education around science and air quality and volatile organic compounds, because we believe that the basic science will help pull back the veil of what's going on here and help us communicate effectively with our legislators about what kind of changes we need to see to protect community health. And also, because of our time constraints, we've got a little out of order, and I want to make sure that we get our community members who actually live in this community the opportunity to speak. So we're going to start with Armando Payan, who is a member of this community and a parent at Garden Place Academy, and he's here with an expert to talk about a concern regarding benzene in the school.
to make this real quick because my colleague, Kurt Reinhold, has to leave, and he's an expert, and also did the testing at Garden Place Elementary School. One of the things that I just want to tell you about, we keep echoing about 80216, and I apologize, but, you know, I live in this neighborhood, and I'm going to die early, 10 years off of my life. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I hope to live to your age to enjoy them. If that doesn't happen, I'm glad we're in the Holy Transfiguration Church. Given that being said, we did it just real quick. Purity did a study, and air quality study over at the school. We had one of the graduate students that they did projects all over 216 in terms of air quality, the environment, and all that fun stuff. But what happened was that we had a student that designed a mural over at Garden Place, and I asked Kurt, can we make the mural interactive? And he can engage the students, but make it more meaningful in terms of being able to do something with the air quality. They have a product called titanium dioxide. What it does, it kills the contamination in the air, and it purifies the air. And coming to the professor's point about doing social economic studies, I like him to take on Garden Place School, the students, the faculty, and the staff, and measure their health impacts. As you know, benzene kills people. 0 is the most acceptable. There's 5 times that amount over there. When I take my kids to school, I feel like taking them to death, and that's not right. That being said, I'm just going to turn it over to Kurt because he did the actual study and the testing for pre and post, and the application of titanium dioxide, and we can get into a technical question. Then he has to leave. That's why I asked him, and I'm making this real good. Kurt, and believe me, Kurt did this out of the bottom of his heart. He didn't get paid or anything. And he lives down in Douglas County. So for him to come over to Denver here and help us out and bring some environmental awareness, in fact, I think we should give him a applause.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. I want to just quickly review what we did at Garden Place because I think that you need to know the cooperation that we got from DPS and where we are today with that and possible next steps. But as Armando said, that there was a beautification project that's going on at GPA, I call it. But I mean, spectacular things that are going on there. And so we had a chance to get involved in this. And what we did is we took a mural that Jamie Castile designed and painted inside one of the stairwells in the school. And that stairwell has a beautiful big window in that stairwell. And the technology that we use needs sunlight to work. And so we said, well, why can't we paint the mural, cover it with this technology, and get the reaction that we need and reduce the VOCs in that particular space of the school. So VOCs are volatile organic compounds. I can't get into a big, long thing about VOCs, but it's contaminants in the air, airborne contaminants. Everything from vehicles to makeup and perfumes, all types of stuff. If you burn candles, you're probably creating VOCs in your house, some good, some bad, right? So we got the approval of the school. The school said, check with GPS, or with the Colorado Public Schools, make sure that they're okay with this, which they did. They said, sure, go right ahead, because it wasn't costing money. And it gave us an opportunity to improve the technology. So we took air, both quantity measurements and quality measurements of the air in the same space that we treated. And again, this is a stairwell in the school. Okay, we took measurements for a week, then we treated, and then we took measurements for another week. Okay, we sent all that information to a lab, third-party lab, to do the analysis of all that data. And what it came back was, hey, these were your VOCs before, these are your VOCs afterwards. It was about a 37% overall reduction, which is pretty significant. You can't do that with HVAC systems. Most you can get out of HVAC improvements is about 10%. So we reduced VOCs by 37%. But there was a bad animal that showed up, benzene, and we felt that had to be reported to the school. So we met with the school and said, hey, here's what we found. We were able to lower VOCs by 37%, but benzene showed up, again, not in the whole school, in this area that we tested, right? And you should be aware of that. And at that time, they were impressed with the results that we had. Didn't say much about the benzene, but they didn't say, well, we don't believe you, or we don't know. They said, we need to get the funding to do this project. So our project was to treat the whole school, all right? And we were gonna go in, clean the whole school, disinfect the whole school, then apply this technology, give it a very good baseline. And that technology was going to keep it in a sustained state of low VOCs. It's about $13,000 to do that. And they said, you know, it's just, doesn't seem to be a lot of money, but it still needs to get approved. So that's kind of where we've been for 6-7 months. We haven't heard anything else. Armando, as a concerned parent of the school, is trying to get funding from somebody, somehow, somewhere, to do this. In the meantime, I think there's also efforts to understand where is this coming from, right? And I think it's all been focused on benzene, which is, you know, problematic. But at the same time, it's not the only thing that's in the air. There's other bad VOCs in the air. Benzene, I can tell you though, if you look it up, the main sources of benzene as a contaminant come from petroleum-based byproduct, which is cars. And we have 32 lanes of traffic between the north and the west side of the school. So my guess is that that's where it's coming from. I don't think you need to do a big, long test to figure out where is it coming from. And then the other part of it is that you know, the other contaminants the other part of benzene is also cigarette smoke. So just for you smokers, benzene's bad. You don't want to smoke. So those are the two largest areas that people get contaminated by benzene. The other VOCs, there's a group of VOCs that they call NOx, right? You've heard of NOx, but that's where we reduced most of that by 37%. Typically, you wouldn't find NOx in a building. It's usually outside because it's created mostly by vehicles and gas combustion engines. Wouldn't necessarily see it in a school, but we see it in the schools because the windows are open because they don't have air conditioning, right? So it's just a bad situation. My point here today is we have the ability to make it better. The school hasn't said no. We don't believe in the technology. I think it's just a matter of getting funding, right? And so use community leaders, neighborhood leaders, whatever, you can do that. And there may be opportunities for Swansea School, same thing, in your homes. What happens with these contaminants is they build up in your homes and your indoor air quality can be 7 to 10 times worse than outside because it accumulates in the house. So there's ways to do this. If you have questions about the technology, it's interesting. It's been endorsed and it's used by NASA. It's used all over the world. China, Japan, third world countries that have big issues with pollution. They're putting it on the outside of the building, trying to clean up their outside air. Yes.
What happens when the children go outside to play?
It's not a good thing, you know. And I know that people they've heard about EPA today. Look at EPA. They have some of the strongest federal rules. You may have been let down maybe at a local level. Strongest federal rules with the highest penalties, right? And then OSHA uses those rules to enforce OSHA regulation as well. So you should look at OSHA as well. Yeah.
Another well-known source or vector of benzene contamination is petroleum distillate soil contamination.
Yep.
Have there been soil studies done around the perimeter of the school to find out if we might be getting at that as well, whether from leaking underground storage tanks, other sources?
Yeah, I don't know if there's been any done.
And I think that's part of the problem here. When Armando came to us to have this conversation, they have brought it forward to DPS. They're not taking action. He's trying to organize to get to the school board. He's been on Univision and in public health, like trying to get the media here. He asked for our help. We're bringing forward experts here. And just so we're clear, maybe people don't understand, it says titanium dioxide. It reacts with sunlight and changes these VOCs and it takes them out of the air and then you clean them off, correct?
You don't have to clean it
Oh, you don't have to clean them off.
It oxidizes them. Yes.
How much of the 13 grand that you need is labor And how can we provide it for you?
About
Well, we had-
almost 50% labor.
We had the Sierra Club, Victor Walton doing the help out with that. We were wanting to do it during the summer when kids aren't there. We can empty out all the classrooms, get all the furniture in the middle, and then turn Kurt loose along with some other trained individuals. But just to add to that, AJ just committed right now $5,000 match on that 13,000. So Tim, come on, man, you're our neighborhood guru here. Step up, brother.
So, I see here we have a representative from the city who works in air quality, right? Let's see, we'd like to have you have an answer.
Yeah, I was curious if you measured, so you measured VOCs before and after, right?
Right.
So what was the reduction specifically in benzene before and after? Because, I mean, so you're saying the issues with benzene. I was just curious what the reduction in benzene was before and after.
I don't want to misstate it, but it was, I think, 23%. I can double check in the report and let you know that. I'm sure.
Is the report public?
The report is not public. The report belongs to Denver Public Schools.
So we can get that from Denver Public Schools?
If they were willing to share it today.
Joni Riggs.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I've been in the email thread with you, I think, I'm AE.
You're who?
On the, he's in the email thread, right?
Kurt's in.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here's what I want to ask, and
Sure.
for general knowledge. I went back and forth on an email trying to get a focus on where the fulcrum points are with you and Armando on this report. I think this thing is outrageous and fantastic. It's such an easy solution to a critical
Okay,
problem.
what do you mean by the focal point?
The-
Kurt is the one that actually did the testing.
No, that's okay. In the
Not the
okay.
parent that requested that, so
Yeah.
what do we need?
What I mean by that is the Denver Public Schools, EPA, where the switch is, and the principal didn't seem to know about the report. There seemed to be some confusion about where, this is, I mean, I would love for Denver Inc. to publish the report. You know, let's get it.
Okay, let me tell you what happened. The principal that's currently there at the school, she's leaving.
Yeah.
She's leaving, okay? So there's no interest right there, first of all. We did do outreach to the current principal, Rebecca Solomon. We did advise her, we let her know, we gave her a copy of the report. For whatever reason, she didn't digest it, I don't know. He needs to follow up with Rebecca Solomon. Our goal was to share that information with the school officials, administrative officials. We shared it with the city as well. So, you know, we did full disclosure, we're trying to get support here. We're only talking about $13,000.
And I
So we went
support
to
that.
DPS.
Yeah.
We went to DPS to share that. Sam Miller, he's on our side, said, Ryan, let's try to do this. And to no avail. Joni Rick said they want to do their own study, which is fine. And in the meantime, the kids are taking in Benzene and they're dying.
So the reason I'm posing, thank you Armando, the reason I'm posing that question here is for everybody to help recognize where the institutions have to come together and make sure that they're listening to what's coming through, because there's a lot of confusion in there about who knows what inside DPS, EPA, and the neighborhood advocates. And that's the focal point, that boom. And I totally support that.
I don't think there's no miscommunication here. We shared it with everybody. Tim's got involved in it. Andrew's got involved in it. Gretchen, Holloran, we met with her, we sat down. We sat down with DPS. Where's the breakdown? You tell me.
Yeah. So
They know about
13,000 should be reachable.
It should be, I just want to make sure we put it in perspective. We treated a stairwell of the school, we didn't treat the whole school, okay?
What level
So
is
what we
it?
found was based on a very small segment of the school, and just to be fair, I mean, you have to we're making assumptions for the whole school based on that small area that we sampled. And that may be where Denver Public Schools is saying they wanted to do more testing.
Is that ground level or
And
base level?
we also reached out to Michael Lewis, the director of CDOT, and he blew me off. So, and I gave it to him, and I gave a copy of that email to Amy Ford. If you guys want a copy of that, I have no problem sharing it with you. I used to work in CDOT, and I know these people personally. So,
Sure.
What's the life cycle of the technology?
About 5 years. What we do is we spray it on the inside windows. That's where the sunlight comes through, it reacts with titanium dioxide and humidity, and it continuously scrubs the air. We spray it on very, very thin. It goes out about 40 microns thin, which is very, very thin, but it's very, very effective.
And a technology we can explore throughout, not just.
yeah,
Oh,
we want to
And
do
there's
it
a lot
all.
of information online, just look it up on,
Yeah,
Google
one more.
titanium dioxide. Question from the back.
So when you guys did your study, did you measure the outdoor benzene concentrations as well as the indoor? 'Cause how do we know if it's different?
We didn't measure anything outdoors at
So you didn't have a comparative data set?
No.
Just focused in on the inside of the
No,
school.
just was inside of the school.
Those
Or
kids
before and
spend
after.
8 hours a day is inside the school.
And I think the reason we brought them here is to bring this to their attention because they want to help pushing DPS to do more testing.
Yep.
So that we can get to the bottom of this about what really is happening or not.
So the only caution on that,
May I, before you start that?
I think that's a really good question, but with the city, I mean, I think that if that is an important question, then I think, is the city willing to do that external testing?
So the city has been measuring benzene in 30-minute concentrations at Swansea for the past year. So we have all of the data for outdoor benzene concentrations.
Okay, right, so that's something you would share with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's published, right? So we have the quarterly reports for benzene concentrations in ambient air at Swansea Elementary for the past year, and that's on our website.
Did you find anything?
I mean, the concentrations are about the same as they saw, 5 micrograms per cubic meter is, I believe, what you're measuring, right?
But remember, 0 is the acceptable level.
But this is, well, my point is that we're ambient conditions are similar. I have a year's worth of, I mean, we've been,
I don't think I need to be nuclear scientist to figure this out.
no, I know, but we have the measurements for a year that we've been taking every 30 minutes.
But you haven't taken any inside the school either.
So is there some way that there could be like sharing and this could move forward? Because it sounds like this is a situation where you guys could share and you could work on this together.
Yeah, DPS, like Kurt mentioned, DPS has the information. It's a private, the testing company that did this gave it to DPS. I'm not in a position to dispose
So
of it.
I've seen the report.
Denver Public Schools is.
No, but his data
You have
is
seen the
his.
report?
I've seen the analytical.
I thought you were implying before that you just wanted access to it.
No, I do, because it wasn't officially given to me by
You do
Pure.
have it.
I've seen the analytical report, right? And from what I've seen in the analytical report, I didn't see any post-benzene numbers.
That was at Swansea or Garden Place?
That was at Garden Place, the report that you guys put together, or the analytical report, right? I didn't see the main text of it, but I didn't see any post-benzene numbers. There was like a suite of maybe 35
Okay,
compounds.
the question is, there is benzene, which is 3 times the level that it shouldn't be there at all, 0.
But
Yes or no?
I guess my question is, we're gonna be painting a school with, purity, but we don't know if it's effective to remove benzene.
well, you could easily prove it, I guess. Again, it's not just benzene, it's all the other contaminants.
No, I understand, but we're focusing in on benzene, right? And that's what we're saying is,
That's the most
That's
harmful.
what you guys are saying.
well, Armando just said it was the most harmful. Like if that's what
You
we're,
tell me your
Yeah,
case, is it the most harmful?
childhood leukemia.
so I'm not an epidemiologist, so I can't speak to the health. I just
You're
know
a
that
chemist, aren't you?
Good.
I am a chemist,
Okay.
but the chemistry, I can tell you, analytical chemistry, something's high, something's low. How much it impacts, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm looking at the analytical report, there is no reduction post-benzene that was shown in the analytical report.
Well, we can get
May
that
I pose the
information.
question to you, are you concerned if there's possibly benzene in the school?
The
As an
ambient,
analytical chemist?
like I said, I'm not an epidemiologist, right? I measure contaminants in the air. Like, I can't speak to the health piece of it.
Mike, this is a very complicated discussion, and I think having my limited knowledge of this, I'm very involved in many of these measurements. What analytical chemistry doesn't seem to tell you is the cumulative effects. We know benzene is bad, but we know there's a lot of bad things in the air, and what is the effect cumulatively?
No,
When they're all together.
I agree.
Nobody seems to be able to answer that.
I agree entirely, right? But I don't know. I mean, if the ambient concentrations are the same as the indoor concentrations, then I don't know how painting a school with.
So you could help advise a better study.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think that's what we were hoping to get out of this.
Yeah.
along with some
Are you willing to
awareness.
take that on as a city?
I personally cannot take that on. I can't speak for the city. I cannot take it on.
This is where I want, we can do my last word of caution. Everybody.
We have the numbers though. I can show you the outdoor concentrations. We have.
More testing, more testing, more testing, more testing, more testing. That's what you're gonna end up with.
Well, I told you we have a year's worth of
It's
data.
Do
suggested-
something.
we suggested a
Bulk
solution.
testing,
We've given
start
them a
acting.
price. The school did not say no, it said they need funding. not getting funding. Right. So I'll leave with that. I love Garden Place. I didn't know anything about Garden Place until about a year ago. And it's a really cool project, and I've learned a lot about the community, certainly not everything, but for me, I think 80216 is, a shame that we have that here right in Colorado.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we have on our agenda is we have Sandra, who's here from the community as well. She wants to talk about her personal experience with dealing with the health issues in Aspen.
This is something my daughter wrote. So for me, for my daughter to write this, it's really hard. It's really hard, so you can see. And well, I have it's not just the problem with the I-70. We don't have any stores anymore. So the only 7-Eleven we had, no more. The only convenience store, Josephine and 47 is gone. So I have to walk. I don't drive. I can't drive. So it's hard for me to find a store. And well, they're not there anymore. And also, like I said before, they're doing this, well, they already demolished the motel. So the kids are playing outside while all the dust is coming out. And they're spraying some, they get tired, I think, and they go back and they do something else. But you can see the dust coming out. And well, my daughter's not allowed to go outside. I told the staff she's not allowed to go outside while the construction of because they're planning to do the playground there where they demolished the motel. So they're gonna do the playground there, and they're gonna do a parking here. So they're gonna do a lot of construction, and all the dust is gonna go all over. It's not gonna stay there. It's not gonna stay one block. It's gonna go all south, north, everywhere. So we're not gonna be the only affected ones. And well, Bridget asked me to come and read this poem that I wrote, and I don't know. I didn't want to read it because I just write my poems and read them, but I will read this one. I've been struggling a lot to sleep. Because I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm been here for almost a year in this area, in Swansea area, and I come from Villa Park because I have to move because of gentrification. I'm a single mom. I have 3 kids. I have my daughter, 7. I have a 19-year-old who is getting ready to go to the university. So I have to save money for him. I didn't have money to go somewhere expensive, so I had to move here. And I knew there were some problems in the soil, in the water, but I wasn't aware of the project. Sometimes you're not aware of things that is happening around the state or the city. So I wasn't aware of that. Then I started getting this whole information, and when I heard that they were going to do this project, I started thinking, they're going to start digging all the contamination. And I'm like, what's going on? That's when I started researching. And it's been hard. It's been hard because, we had to move because of gentrification. Now, I'm planning, I don't know if I'm going to move from here because of the contamination. It's hard for a single mom. It's hard for a single mom with 3 kids. One going to the university, my daughter's 7. My other 15-year-old with special needs. It's really hard. It's really hard. So, now I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help my community, my neighborhoods. Because, I see the kids every day at school. And, I can only ask for the staff not to take my daughter outside while the construction is taking over the demolition thing. And, but I see all the kids running outside and playing. I've asked already the principal, if they're gonna provide masks, if they're gonna, what they're gonna do for the kids. What is DPS doing for the schools? Not only in Swansea, Garden Place. What is DPS doing for the schools? They should be protecting our kids. They're getting paid because of our kids. don't have kids, there's no schools, so what are they going to do? I mean, what about the principals? I mean, they're not doing anything. So it's really hard. It's really hard as a mom to see my daughter go every day. I mean, we have to walk. I mean, even if she doesn't go during the construction, I mean, we're walking all the time. And with the crazy wind that has been happening, I mean, we got home, we got all dirt, and I mean, it's been crazy. It's been crazy. But I have this poem where Bridget asked me to read it, and I wrote this about 2 months ago, a month ago. And I hope you understand my English, because sometimes I get nervous and it's not that great. So I call this poem Insomnia, Herida Swancia, and the ISM expansion. Insomnia once again knocks on my door. I wake up with the same anguish that doesn't let me sleep. I walk around the room to find a solution. I would like to have a magic wand and change the world, but that is just a fantasy. A city that ignores a low-income neighborhood. A government that doesn't care that children die of lung cancer, suffer from asthma, or other health problems. We start to hear the drills. We start seeing the trucks and the tractors go by, driven by the same people in the neighborhood. People deceive without knowing, unaware of what they are digging a contaminated land. They will be sick. Their children will be sick. All for the ambition of power and money, for some Olympic Games. For some politicians that at this time, this moment, sleep peacefully, unconscious, without soul, without spirit. I cry. I cry because I don't know how to help my community that is still healing from the past. How to help my family, my people, my neighborhood. I cry for all the lies that have been told to my community. I cry. I cry for the injustice against my neighborhood. I hope a light enters the sleepy hearts of those politicians to stop this madness, this atrocity, this silent massacre. I hope all those who support this terrorism enjoy their dreams for now, because when they wake up from their long dream, their conscience will take over them, and they will never sleep in peace again, knowing that they destroy a whole community, hundreds of families, and they have sickened our future children. I hope. I hope. And well, thank you for the great clap that, thank you to all of you, for supporting our neighborhood, because it's really hard. It's really hard. I have to the children. I really feel so bad about all the children in the children. And I know there's a lot of communities. I know every community is struggling for something. But why should we struggle? This is our state, our city. This is not politicians' state only. This is not the city. It's our communities. And we have to start being together, not as different communities, but one community, our children. Thank you.
I really appreciate Sandra bringing her story forward in Armando. As you can tell, there's a lot of emotion behind what's going on here. A lot of concern about people's public health. In our presentation, we hope to touch a little bit on the health impact assessment. If those who aren't aware, the health impact assessment was conducted on this community, and they found that these communities are suffering higher rates of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and asthma. And there's a whole host of anecdotal evidence of people just horrific genetic and cancer disorders. The more time that I spent, obviously I ran for city council over here, the more time that I spent talking and knocking doors, the more it was hard to hear why this was happening to people. And it also deepened my concern about anybody living around the highway or an industrial area, especially as we change to this type of zoning that tends to mix industrial and housing uses, which didn't exist before, are these problems we're going to run into in the future. So, you know, I think Drew touched on this, and we wanted just to, I'm just going to list these off. I mean, there's a whole host of planning efforts that have been going on in this community, which is going to drive development, but it also, I think, is going to drive home the point that it's really, really, really difficult if you are this neighborhood, which is lower income, often single family, lower wages, you have to work 2 jobs. If you had a Globeville neighborhood assessment, an Elyria neighborhood plan, a Heron master plan, a Sal Carpio Sanguetti Park master plan, a National Western Stockstill stationary plan, a National Western Center master plan, 41st and Fox Station just across the way, near here was 38th and Blake, 38th and Blake plan amendments, the South Park River Corridor study, and this 2570 development plan. I mean, Drew, I'm just so impressed that you and many of these other people even have the time to attend some of these meetings. But I want to just drive it home. You know, my neighborhood, though has meetings, isn't dealing with this same kind of like push and rush to develop and to plan. And so that's where I think a lot of them are coming to the table questioning whether the public voice is really being heard. Just because you offer meetings doesn't mean that they're always being attended. And I do know that, you know, the NDCC and some of these people have tried, and they do go to door to door. But I just want to point out that it is a very, very overwhelming process to be a participant in, and I think that's been echoed by Drew and many others in this community for quite some time. And I think what's great, and why we wanted to bring this forward, is I think there's so much strength and knowledge within INC to help these people along the way. There are nonprofits who have come to the table with the Sierra Club and Earth Justice to help fight these fights and legal battles, and so these people are in the thick of it, and you know, I think we have a lot to learn. I think there'll be other communities that are going to be developed like this in the future, and I think there's lessons that we're going to have to take away from this. You know, in addition to the gentrification issue, these people in the community are also fighting I-70 and raise the money, their own community not-for-sale conversation and research around housing. They've been concerned about flooding. I know that Candy Sidavaca has talked often about the implications of marijuana and marijuana grows that are heavily within this community. And so they're doing so much that I think it becomes really hard. And then when you complicate health implications on top of it, it becomes just an uphill battle that you can sense in Sandra and in Armando and in their emotions by what they're saying. You know, the highway air pollution, the industrial pollution, the noise from the trains. There's several Superfund sites here, and for those who don't know, a Superfund site is the most environmentally degraded type of soil that can exist under federal standards. Now, some are worse than others, but here we have an Omaha and Grant Smelter one. We have one from the Arsarco site. Suncor Energy is just north of here, a highway, train tracks, and the Farina dogfood factory. And what I would question is, regardless of these communities being moved or moved away, there will be someone living here eventually. And these simple implications will happen to them as well. And so we need to be thinking about growth and development along the highways. Later in this presentation, we'll talk about what they're doing in California around these same kind of issues, because their super developments have resulted in the same kind of health implications. Next on my calendar, on my schedule, was the Sierra Club. And we're very lucky to have Lloyd Burton here from the Sierra Club. And he's just going to talk about a few of the issues they're working on around health, and not just in Denver. And I want this to become clear. We do have these maps, and I apologize that my presentation's gone, but most of North Denver is affected by this. And there are people living along highways all throughout our community, no matter what neighborhood you live in, and the Sierra Club is aimed at trying to protect the public health of everyone.
Appreciate it, Ian. I'm glad you're all here. I appreciate the attention that you are focusing on these issues that we're talking about here this morning. My name is Lloyd Burton, and I'm the leader of the Colorado Sierra Club's issue team on environmental justice and social equity. It's a statewide program, but we focus on specific regions where we see these environmental justice hotspots flashing up. And obviously 80216 and its contiguous zip code is one of them. So there are several different actions going on immediately affecting the environmental health of this community that Ian and Drew and I and others have been working on. Ian and Drew are both members of the Sierra Club's issue team on environmental health. We're partnered with regard to, we continue to be partnered in the lawsuit that we are co-plaintiffs in. We just got some kind of bad news from the judge, so we're still kind of sorting through what to do with that. We're going through this kind of motion to reconsider. One of the messages that I want to bring here is that the Sierra Club is a co-equal partner with the community organizations that's in it for the long haul. Whatever happens with regard to that lawsuit, there are other really heavy issues that are before us right now. One of them is the cleanup that's being done without there having been a prior human health impact assessment, and the emergency cleanup of the global landing site. And what's going on there, we think is in some ways a dress rehearsal of, if the I-70 project does go forward, what's going to happen there. One of the most serious concerns that we have, and Drew and I both serve on the CAG as well as some other people who are here today, at least a concern some of us have, is that with regard to monitoring the air quality during the cleanup, they grab a sample once every 6 days at times and dates known to the constructors. And we think that at least for a certain period of time, there ought to be daily samples taken at random times so that we can get a much more accurate look at what's going on with regard to the air pollution. Then compare that to the samples that have already been taken, see if they track or if in fact we need to do a better job of air quality monitoring. Because with the millions of cubic yards of contaminated soil that's going to be removed from that construction site, fugitive dust is going to be a major concern going forward throughout the construction as well as later on. We also, and we keep talking about cumulative health impact assessments. We've got the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment just gave permission to the Suncor refinery to start emitting hydrogen cyanide, the stuff they used to kill prisoners with in the old days, in state penitentiaries. That's a byproduct of cracking the Athabasca tar sands at that refinery. And so they've been given permission to do that. Again, Colorado Latino Forum, the Swanson Neighborhood Association, Sierra Club, and some other organizations are being represented by Earth Justice to appeal that. Okay. So each of these actions that's going on, okay, all the regulatory agencies that have individual responsibilities for each of those projects say, well, all we really care about is what the law tells us we have to care about. Everything else isn't in our job description. So the city says that with regard to cleaning up the Superfund sites, smelter. EPA says the same thing. CDPHE says the same thing. What we're worried about is that while each of these regulatory agencies is targeting only their own individual areas of responsibility, nobody is looking at the community as a whole. And so that's certainly one of our long-term goals. The Sierra Club, in partnership with the other neighborhood organizations, is to work together to try to get and keep that focus on what the cumulative impacts of everything going in the neighborhood is. Point of scientific fact, benzene is a known cause of childhood leukemia. It also causes leukemia in refinery workers at relatively low levels of concentration if they work there their entire lives, both leukemia and other blood cancers. It's a very dangerous known carcinogen. And whatever levels it's at, when it comes to exposure by our kids, that's something that needs to be addressed. If it's an ambient air problem, there's nothing to say that we cannot make our schools havens of a clean, healthy environment. Thanks.
I think what he's trying to touch on, and we're going to try to get even more to the point across, is that when you regulate one project and it meets your standards, it doesn't take in the cumulative impacts of everything else. They're going to approve it. He's saying morally it's wrong, but we need to be looking at all of these cumulatively for the health of the people, whether you're in coal, or you're here, or you're in Inspiration. I think it all adds up. The next person that was supposed to be on our agenda was from Earth Justice, and unfortunately they were unable to come. But I went and was briefed by 2 hours by them about what is taking place. And I'm going to go through who's involved with this, what the timeline is, and where we're at with the Suncor refinery. So Suncor Energy USA has 3 plants, all located north of here. Right now they're in the midst of updating 1 and 2, or 1 and 3, excuse me, for the permit updates. And they submitted the application. It went through Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and then on to the EPA. a group of 10 10 groups, the Colorado Latino Forum, the Colorado People's Alliance, the Cross Community Coalition, Denver Community Planning Council, Sierra Club, Wild Earth Guardians, the Elyria and Swansea Neighborhood Association, Western Resource Advocates, and Conservation Colorado all came together to submit comments in hopes of achieving, well, I'll get to what they want. I'm going to go through a brief timeline of the refinery. So I guess this refinery has been around since 1938. That's when it began its operation. In 2003, Suncor purchased the second site from ConocoPhillips for $150 million, and then branded Suncor USA. Suncor then purchased 1 and 3 from Valero for $45 million and put $400 million in upgrades to the facility so that they could begin bringing Athabascan tar sands. So the same kind of tar sands that we're talking about with the pipeline are going to account for about 20% of the fuel that is created here at Suncor. In 2010, they were awarded a 5-year permit for that site. In 2011, a benzene leak was discovered in the Sand Creek. It took many years to remediate, and they had to pay large and hefty fines to the community regarding it. In 2014, a new pipeline was constructed in the RT right-of-way going north to south, and we do have an image that will come in the documents. In 2015, a 5-year permit renewal was submitted early for sites 1 and 3. To this day, nothing has been done with them, even despite 18 months passing. Oh, excuse me, I take that back. In 2015, a 5-year permit for this was agreed to. In 2016, flares of air pollution occurred, and they applied for an early permit for 1 and 3, but nothing's happened with that. That's 2016. In 2017, again, there were issues with flares of pollution, and I'm sure you guys heard about these. They were in the news. They shut down the highways. We do have images. I apologize again for no screen. Since then, they applied for a permit renewal of Site 2, and the community of these 10 groups submitted their comments. Earlier this year, in January, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment approved it. The EPA didn't comment, which meant that they were allowed to renew their permit with exceptions. And this tar sands, I have an image here, is the kind of pit mining that you've seen since the 90s, quite destructive. There's a pipeline that comes all the way from Denver, all the way from Fort McMurray, near the Arctic Circle. So that's where 20% of our fuel comes from. What the community is asking for, and I have them write these down, is for the permits, 1 and 2 and 1 and 3, to be combined into one permit. That this refinery should operate under one permit, because if they operate under one permit, it makes it easier for them to monitor, easier for regulation, and easier for the community to track compliance. They want to improve technology and fence line monitoring. They want to improve safety and emergency planning. They took issue with baseline emissions and the formula that was used that included malfunctions that would allow them to emit more. Hydrogen sulfide, which isn't currently regulated and is a problem with the fracking, as a result of the fracking, isn't currently regulated and they would like it to be. And because they only made minor modifications, they were able to go through what is called the Emergency Protection and Community Rights to Know Act, which is a reporting loophole that allowed them to not have to do a complete redo of their permit under greater federal scrutiny, is what I was told. So where we're at is a community that now is going to be subjected to greater amounts. They do not believe that the technology has been improved. There's been no improvements in fence line monitoring, and really where we're at now is around safety and emergency safety planning. As you can understand, with I-70 and all these other constructions, National Western, we heard there's not stores, what's the access going to be? Joel was talking about what's the transportation circulation going to be like. They have serious and harsh concerns about what happens if an accident happens at this plant, and how are people going to get away. If you shut down the highways that are already overloaded because this is being constructed, and there aren't ways out, people are very concerned about that. I personally have asked Alice Brooks to come to help with this. We talked to legislators in Adams County, and right now, the state of Colorado is saying they're going to entertain talking with us about better community safety planning. But we believe that pressure behind seeing other groups like this can help bring a better outcome for the people in case of an accident. So that was the slides that they provided me with. The next thing that we have on our list here is about mitigation. And I actually took pieces out from what CDOT's put forward and what the city and county of Denver have put forward regarding community mitigation and what they believe is an adequate amount. For Swansea Elementary School, they redesigned and constructed are going to reconstruct the playground. They've installed new windows and doors and heating and ventilation systems. They've committed to sampling the soil around cleaned up residential properties. They are committed to requiring continuous PM10 dust monitors to be placed all along the corridor. Let's see. The city of Denver has added even more to what they're trying to do. They're adding 2 portable window-mounted air conditioners with air filtration, furnace filters, storm windows, caulking and weather stripping, carbon monoxide and smoke detectors, programmable thermostats, attic insulation, and energy credits. This is only applicable if you live within the 2-block radius of the highway. If you live outside of that area, they've listed other programs that might be able to help you, but we're pretty sure through this cumulative impact that it's not going to just be about the people around I-70. And moreover, from what the research says, is these are only effective if you spend, if all your doors are closed all the time, you spend all your time indoors. Well, if this project takes 6 years, are the kids going to be able to go outside? Are you going to be able to walk to a local grocery store? All these cumulative impacts are going to add up, and people are afraid of it. I know that Drew is working right with personal monitors that people are going to be wearing that are mobile, that are going to be traveling around the community.
We're trying to get more air monitors.
Ian, we got one here.
Oh, you have one in here, great.
We got 2 parts per whatever, PM 2.5 right now. So this is, I don't know if you want me to say this.
Yeah, please, I would love to hear more about this.
This is what's called an air beam, and it's put out by Habitat, which is an environmental earth justice thing. It came out of the Fukushima disaster where people wanted to know where are the high levels of radioactivity, whatever. So leave it to the community, open source. So you can buy the $5,000 EPA 2.5-pound thing, or you can get this for $250. And it's open source, Arduino programming. It talks to a Bluebeam, via Bluebeam to your Android app. It's mapped into Google Maps right now. So even if you didn't have this, but there were other people in the community walking around with this monitor, you could see what their monitors are reading. So this is real time. You've seen a lot of work with this being done in New York City and San Francisco because of people who walk so much in a city environment by highways and transportation and stuff, and they want to know, what am I getting exposed to? So that's where a lot of the work has been done. I haven't seen too many readings here in Denver, but it is an option. So basically you can get 20 of these for one of the EPA monitoring. What they find is that they work pretty well all the way up to about 400 units versus, and at 35 is really the action item time for people in terms of exposure. That's EPA guidelines. Here in the building right now, I'm monitoring about 1 to 2. I've walked around my neighborhood at times. If the pollen's going good and there's a good breeze, I'm up at 20 parts. So it starts giving you a yellow warning about 12.5 parts. So this would be something, I don't know if you want to do a GoFundMe, the city can provide, but you can get 20 of these for one station.
Can you say your name and the neighborhood you're in?
Oh, my name is Patty Ortiz. I'm in University Hills neighborhood, and that's where I've done some of the monitoring, trying it out. One of the reasons why I got this also, though, too, is for people who are in business, construction-wise, et cetera, NIOSH has issued updated rules relative to employee exposure to the PM 2.5 particles. They're requiring more diligently the NIOSH level rated respirators, the dust masks. You go into Home Depot and you try and buy a drill or a sander. They all have vacuums now picking up on the dust. So it's an important thing for everybody relative to no matter what you're doing. So I'm running it, if anybody's interested in looking at it, looking at technical papers that have compared it to universities. Some universities have done some studies. It's good correlation until you start, I don't know, having a campfire in your living room. But it's
Spell
an
the
option.
unit again so people can write it down and look online, please.
It's called an air beam, and it's the app is Air Casting, and it's put out by Habitat Map, which is a nonprofit environmental health justice organization. They build mapping tools to support grassroots environmental organizing. You can actually download all the parts. If you have high school kids who are into, if they're geeks, Arduino, programming, 3D printing, you can download all that and build it yourself if you want to do that too.
Patty, to be sure, it is for measurement,
Measurement,
not to keep you healthy.
yes.
Right, that's it.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Yes. But if you don't know,
I know, I get
so
that.
it's the first step to find out what I'm using it indoors for doing a home demolition project, but that's a different story.
I have a
Yeah,
question.
just real quick,
On the website,
Excuse me?
put it on the web,
Yeah.
on financing.
Just-
On our-
Oh, I can give the links. I can give the links.
hey, Ian, just real quick too, for future, as soon as possible discussion, George, I would love for Inc. to determine if you wanted to divert some money to purchasing some of these or work to help create some matching funds, and we're meeting to deploy some of these in Globeville ASAP, so, for future discussion.
I have a question for Michael. How efficient are these monitors since you're the expert?
Yeah. So these are really cool, and they're really good for putting on people and walking around and collecting GPS coordinates, kind of all that stuff.
Yeah.
And with low-cost sensors these days, you can really do a lot with them. So there's another company called Purple Air, also similar in price point, about $250 a unit, that measures the exact same thing, right? PM 2.5. And it also measures a whole host of other stuff like PM10, PM5, and it gets really down there. So if you guys do put these Purple Air sensors in there, we're actually developing a platform to kind of ingest all of that data in real time and look at that and kind of map all over the city. And the sensors we're putting on at schools is part of another grant that we're working with the schools to put them on. We're actually taking the Purple Air sensor and putting them in ours. So there's some limitations as to data communication and things like that. So with Purple Air, for instance, you have to plug it into a wall outlet, and you have to have Wi-Fi, which isn't always accessible, right? So the city's actually using that same technology, which is proven, really good correlation values, like you're saying. So using that same technology and putting them at schools, and then tracking all that data as well. So as we continue to evolve the program, we'll be able to track a much denser look at air quality throughout the city as a whole. And some of those schools are here as well. Some people are participating. We're looking for volunteers if anyone wants to help. But we're deploying those at Swansea. We're deploying them at Garden Place. We're deploying them at Fairview. So we're doing all of this stuff, and low-cost sensor technology is allowing us to do that because it is low cost, and we can do it at a much denser. And you underestimated the cost, right? So under the cost of the actual instruments, right? So what's kind of the state level monitor? It's about $25,000. So at the same price point, you can increase your density of PM monitoring. I like that.
Can the city or CDOT provide those to the community since they're the ones doing all this mess?
So I can't speak to what the city can and can't do. As far as like, so we are providing, we're doing it, right? The difficult part is kind of the uptime and downtime of these low-cost sensors. So we have deployed Purple Air sensors just kind of out of the box to see how the uptime is. And a lot of times they'll just go out, right? And with Purple Air, you actually have to go out and unplug it and plug it back in. And then the sighting is also difficult too, because you do have to have access to all these different things. So that's why the city kind of took it upon ourselves to work with local engineering firms to develop something that we can put everywhere. So we've redeveloped Purple Air, low-cost sensors, with batteries, solar panels, data communication via cellular, to be able to kind of increase that monitoring network. And we are also doing a custom platform, so that custom platform will also have a public-facing page for all of the data, so that you guys can see all the data in real time, because we are collecting minute data, so every single minute we'll get a reading. And then we actually, right now, if you guys drive by Swansea, there's you can probably see an array of like 9 boxes, and those are added there. So those are like this technology that we're developing that'll actually, so we can kind of see how it compares to the much more expensive instrumentation. So we're kind of testing all that stuff now. Obviously, when you're kind of building something from scratch, it takes a little bit of time, but we're in the testing phase now, and the ones that are on there, we've been testing them for about 3 weeks, and we'll be deploying them soon. The ones that are going in schools will be getting the first versions, there's about 10 of them, they'll be getting next week, which we'll start testing for a couple of weeks, and hopefully be deployed at 10 schools mid-May-ish. And then we're also working with schools, so I've talked to 5 principals about kind of getting buy-in to kind of not only put the sensors there, but then also work with the schools to put programming in place to kind of let people know like what's actually going on. And there's also different programs. There's a company called AQ Tracks, which is out of Boulder. It's doing in-school programming, so kids can actually walk around with these sensors as well to kind of measure that air quality impact. And the city is providing funds to kind of put those programs in places at schools to kind of raise awareness with the kids specifically about what's going on in your environment, because that's the next generation, right? And those are the people who are going to kind of be here after us and kind of help drive this in a much more impactful way.
What are the questions for?
It's just a reminder that if you read my column in this profile, you'll notice that there are many more developments going on east of here. And most people will undoubtedly use this highway. So that I hope that that is taken into consideration as the future of whatever is going by here. It's going to be much more crowded, I think. And we get thousands and thousands of people living out there that are going to come in this way. And I think that we need to put that into the mix of everything you're studying, that the future holds greater traffic, no matter how many parking spaces the city wants to provide. And that it's a health issue primarily. It's mental, physical, and the planet. The health of all of those things is foremost in our thinking.
So, please forgive my ignorance in all of this, but I was just wondering, when the monitoring, with all of the air monitoring, and it ends up exceeding limitations, what are they going to do to change that? Or suck it out of the air, or eliminate it from the... I just want to know what's going to happen, just because we see
I think we've all been asking those same questions.
So they have all of the... Maybe this guy back here, who is talking for the city, might be able to... All of this information that you're gathering, what's the remedy? What are you going to do with it?
So I can't speak for CDOT since it's their project. I know they're considering using a much denser network of air monitors. They're considering it right now. I've been talking to them to try and help them to do that. But in terms of what actually they're doing, I mean, what we've seen around construction sites, we've used these low-cost sensors around different construction sites just to kind of see how it compares. And even when it's like something like global landing outfall, we do see an increase of about, I'd say about 30% during construction versus non-construction. But that's still far lower than what the National Ambient Air Quality Standard is. So it's at about 150 is the standard. And even with construction, you're at around 80 or 90. There was one spike, but that was a meteorological issue with inversions. And that was seen not only global landing outfall monitoring, but monitoring around the entire city. It was more regional.
Well, basically, when we have what they did in the past with the air quality, they told everybody they couldn't burn wood. And we'd have all of these different alert things.
Yep.
What is it that we're going to do that will help us live through this catastrophe? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, I'm Tim
And
Sandos.
you are?
I am Tim Sandos, the Executive Director of the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative. We are an agency of the mayor's, and I'm appointed by the mayor. That one of our specific roles is to oversee the 148 different mitigations in the IGA and the ROD between, and then the intergovernmental agreement between CDOT and the city. To your question specifically, our role is to oversee when the air quality exceeds a certain level, that we will actually stop all construction until we can bring it back down. We have several different projects that we do, people who are very good, smarter than I am, about how you actually mitigate the air with water and other things to manage dust, those sorts of things that happen. So that's why the air quality monitors are part of the 148 mitigation, so that we can constantly be checking air quality every minute and then be able to adjust accordingly for what has to happen in the project. And again, mitigations that the professionals who do this work manage, but then up to and including shutting down the project and not moving them farther if the air quality areas go beyond what the standards are set, and then those are also set in the ROD, or the Record of Decision, and the IGA. One question I did want to ask you was, you would ask for volunteers for the walking monitor, and does the city provide the monitors for those individuals who are going to be?
So for the volunteers, we're looking for, it's related, right? So for the volunteers, what we're looking for is to kind of help work with the schools to limit idling, right? So right now we're in this testing phase. We're trying to find the best way to stop parents from idling by schools. So we'll be trying different things like signage. We'll be trying something a little bit more active where, you know, parents get pledges and things like that. So we're looking for volunteers to help monitor that for the next 6 weeks, which we'll be monitoring at Fairview, Swansea, and Garden Place. So if anyone wants to volunteer to help out, I know some people have already volunteered. Thank you. To help monitor, yes.
Well, I wasn't really quite, just one more, I need to finish with him before I yield the table. You weren't here earlier when I mentioned that I live in Cole, which is right off of Bruce Randolph Avenue. And with all of the construction and the demolition and everything that's been going on, and the mere fact that our atmospheric pressure and the water in our atmosphere has diminished so much, where I live, I'm feeling the impact of the construction that took place to where I thought I had a sinus infection.
Yes.
I'm sure that you're talking about 2 or 3 blocks around this specific area. I'd like to have some kind of way that we can measure over in our neighborhood a lot further to see what kind of impacts. And it's not just young people, it's old people like me.
Are you talking about the third project?
No, I'm talking about the construction of the demolition that took place here recently with some of the buildings along I-70. I'm not talking about the construction going over there, because there's no demolition yet. Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. We heard a lot of talk about, well, it's not a problem because it's not exceeding the national ambient air quality standards. Those are some standards that were set by the EPA about 9 years ago. Before, there was quite a lot of epidemiological research done on exposure to microparticulates at 2.5 level, the very smallest ones measurable. The evidence that we are seeking now to get the judge in the Clean Air Act case to reconsider and have a closer look at, we have some very substantial scientific studies out there showing that you can still have profoundly negative human health impacts from exposure to air that's within the national ambient air quality levels. So we have a 40% higher rate of emergency room admissions for childhood asthma. In this neighborhood is the 70% higher rate of congestive heart disease. Both of those human health conditions are in fact directly attributable to exposure to microparticulates. So the problem I think that we're looking at here is that the goal of the regulatory agencies, because that's, you know, it's an old standard, everyone knows it's not protective of human health, but it remains the standard. And so the legal responsibility of CDOT, of the city, of these other CDPHE, the other regulatory agencies, is to make sure that we don't exceed these national ambient air quality standards, even though the evidence we put before the judge shows that you can have terrible human health impacts even below the level of ambient air quality standards. And so what we're hoping to do is find some means of having that taken account of as we seek to regulate the pollution from the construction.
I think what you're saying there is what's being shown in evidence in LA and many of these other places. they're finding that even if you live within 500 feet, and perhaps even farther than 500 feet, you're having negative implications, even though these air pollutants are within these ambient standards as they're qualified. In California, I have a whole host of these, again, they'll come in your presentation. They're talking about whether they should fund affordable housing next to freeways, even though the property is affordable, but it's within 500 feet, knowing that that's an issue. They're talking about what happens with developers and whether they need to require them to put in these higher grade filters, but whether there'll be regulation to make sure that they're changed on a regular basis. You know, there's articles, tons of articles that talk about whether we're building schools next to highways or whether they should exist there in the first place. You know, the American Lung Association, well, I should go to the schools one. The National Institute of Health studied all the schools within America in 2006. And they found about 6 million kids are going to school within 250 meters of a highway. And they talked through this study, which I'll share with you, about health implications that they see related to that, and how they're suggesting policy that moves away from not building schools next to highways, certainly not constructing a playground for children on top of a highway. And there's a study here by the American Lung Association that is a panel. They looked at over 700 studies from around the world examining the health impacts of traffic pollution, and they found that onset of childhood asthma, impaired lung function, premature death, cardiovascular disease, blood disease was occurring, and that the bandwidth was up to 0.3 miles or 500 meters from the highway. So when we're talking about how they're only willing to mitigate within 2 blocks of the highway, there are many, many people that are not within that area that are set to be affected by what's going to happen with these cumulative impacts. And that's really what we were trying to drive home as we worked our way through these, to show you that there are many, many concerns along the way, that the scope is much larger than the government is willing to come forward with.
Ian, just a minor correction, it's within 1 block of the highway. The mitigations are from 45th to 47th.
Yes.
It's the 2 blocks, so within 1 block of the highway.
On each
So
side.
that is the extent.
Technical measures 500 feet within the highway, be it a block or more,
Yeah.
depending on what the 500 feet is.
On the north side of 600.
Yeah, and we have those maps in here. So as you've seen, and if you've attended the zoning or planning meetings when we have brought Rocky Pure, the former city planner, forward, now at the university, he talked a lot about what we'd like to see in our planning moving forward and in our comprehensive plan. And I would like to suggest an environmental protection and restoration and human health, the issues that are elevated into our comprehensive planning, so that we can get to the bottom of this no matter what neighborhood you live in, because there are many, many that are along these types of highways. And that, that was the end of what we were talking about, was the cumulative impact. I think we're at a place now where we're hoping that this would spur community conversation to talk about your thoughts. And I know that you didn't get the science videos, but I think you guys get the gist. Jim, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One would be for Mrs. Burton. I'm wondering, under the rubric, both these questions of has everything been investigated or is it being investigated? Has the Bloomberg Foundation been approached regarding the exceptional urgency that Denver metro area has relative to improving air quality and research, and have they been requested to underwrite any of this cost? And the other question has to do with, I guess, what is the power of the state executive order relative to overruling the judge's decision to allow construction to be going on while this environmental research effort is continuing?
So you're asking if the governor can stop it? Is that your question?
I am,
I think we've all come to the conclusion the governor can stop this.
okay.
In fact, we've been asking candidates for governor that very question. We had an opportunity to meet with the policy director for Carey Candy, and our lead counsel and I actually managed to spend about a half an hour or so with Jared Polis and his campaign manager talking about these same issues. So we're going to do everything possible to make sure that this remains a front and center issue going forward insofar as the gubernatorial races. And for that matter, the race for Congress, turns out that Representative Jagett has a fairly robust rival for the Democratic nomination this time around. So these are definitely the kinds of issues that should be brought up in public forums whenever possible. As to reaching out to that particular foundation, I don't have any knowledge of that, but it certainly sounds like.
I mean, you know, closely related the Bluebird Foundation in the past has been with the Sierra
Yeah,
Club.
we can follow up with them.
Are you saying you've been working with them?
Yes, so Bloomberg is actually funding the air monitoring at schools.
Okay. Were there any other questions or discussion? Yes, Lamont.
What schools were selected from that Bloomberg grant?
So the list is not publicly available yet, and the reason we have not released that is because we need to make sure with the schools that they're willing to participate. So we've identified 5 of them, and we're still, I'm calling principals, trying to kind of get their buy-in, because we have the buy-in from DPS to place them at the schools, they own the facilities. But what we're actually really looking to do is kind of involve the entire school community through kind of interaction and kind of making sure we have programs that work for those schools. So we haven't identified the full list of 10, and we're waiting to release that publicly until we've identified schools that are definitely on board for all of it.
And hopefully some schools in this community are on that list, right?
So Garden Place, Swansea, and Fairview, we are working with them, and we'll be starting those programs next week.
Good, all right.
Just a quick comment. I didn't watch the gubernatorial debate the other night, but my wife did, and I trust my wife. She says that all the candidates will support the project, the I-70 project. None are opposed to it. I think Mike Johnston would want to do some mitigation, but they're all in favor of this.
Sad state of affairs, huh?
One, the time, but also there's one theme that seems to emerge from all the comments. We all need better data. Data. So that how all of this, like measurements and start thinking about words you were talking about, particularly matter spatial orientation, temporal flows with the social behaviors that I'm talking about raising our collective ability to improve the well-being of all communities to a completely different level once you have all that valid and reliable data in one location. I think it's just really an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, 12 o'clock. Does anybody have any other comments? Oh, I see one back here.
Just following up on that, you know, the Suncor spill was discovered by a fisherman in the South Platte, and he noticed a sheen on the water and he followed it up to that. We're the canaries in the coal mine, okay? So no matter what you're doing, walking or anything, you see birds behaving weird, you see rabbits behaving weird, you see something weird. If you have a chance to take a picture, if not, at least try, say something. I guess that's the thing. See something, say something.